defense, special attack, special defense, and speed has a corresponding IV that is just kind of an invisible number that you don't really get to see. And it's just a number between 0 and 31 inclusive. The higher the number is, the higher your stat's going to be. And that's going to persist like as there's Pokemon levels up. You can't change your IVs. They don't increase over time. They don't decrease over time or anything like that. They're fixed. So I have gotten 31 in every single stat, and that is perfect. In addition, I got Adamant Nature. That increases my attack, which again, Tepig has the highest base attack of any starter in any generation of Pokemon games. And I also have minus special attack from that nature. And it turns out that it just does not matter because I'm not going to use a lot of special based attacks. And when I do, it usually is okay that I have that detriment.
And in case people don't know about natures, it just adds or subtracts 10% from the stat. And there's some neutral natures, but none of them affect health. They only affect attack, defense, special attack, and defense, and speed.
Yep. So now we're in the tutorial section of the game. There's not a whole lot interesting going on at this point. We're going to get some running shoes. We're going to learn what a Pokemon Center is. I guess if you're watching this sort of marathon, you may actually not be entirely familiar with Pokemon games. You might be used to more... you might be used to what's more traditionally called RPGs, like Final Fantasies and Lost Odyssey and things of that nature. So the general gist of the Pokemon world is kids, for some reason, at some age of coming, are given a Pokemon, which is like basically a magical creature, and there's a bunch of different species of Pokemon, just like there are different species of animals in the world. And when you come of age, you're given a Pokemon, then you're basically just sent out to go about the world, wandering in the tall grass, where who knows what lies in wait, and using your Pokemon to have battles against other Pokemon.
Or spraying repels if you don't want to do that.
Indeed. There are both wild Pokemon in the grass, and there's also trainers who hang around the world, and they just want to also battle you. And that's basically the whole kind of backstory. And generally there are these places called Pokemon gyms where like an elite kind of trainer has established like a theme-based challenge area basically where you kind of are expected to test your mettle, and there's usually 8 in each game. And then once you have beaten each of the 8 gyms, then you get 8 badges. You get 1 from each, and you go to the Pokemon League, where once you have all 8 badges, you compete against the Elite 4 trainers, who are usually also themed in some way, and they're all big and bad and scary. And once you've defeated them, then you face off against the champion of the region. So that's basically the idea. The actual mechanics of this game, it's turn-based combat. Each Pokemon has up to 4 moves. Each move has a number of times it can be used. Those are called PP. And there's a huge array of different moves with all sorts of results. Who goes first each turn is determined by your speed. It's just whoever's faster. If there's a speed tie, it's a 50% chance that either person goes first. And it's really pretty, it's developed to a pretty significant extent so that now it's really fairly complicated. In the original Pokemon games, the red and blue versions, or in Japan, I guess, red and green versions,
Yeah.
were much, much simpler, and they've just added more and more kind of mechanics over time, and they've still kept kind of the same feel. So if you've never played a Pokemon game, I highly recommend playing any one of them. The latest games, X and Y, are very good. I also highly recommend this game, White 2, or its counterpart. They always come in pairs. Black version 2. They're both very good games. This is Alder. He likes to jump off cliffs and waste our time.
And he is the champion from the first part of Gen 5, White
Indeed.
and Black.
This is a sequel to those games.
And he is no longer the champion. He has retired. So
He's too old for this.
now they're just kind of using him as a plot device here. Because, yeah, Pokemon games do kind of have a plot. There's always some sort of villainous subplot that you have to deal with. Team Rocket, of course, being the most well-known, and then a bunch more teams after that with different names and nefarious goals.
So this is our first trainer. So generally the way that things are set up in the world is there will be what's called a route. It's just an area where you have to traverse a bunch of stuff. And on the route there will usually be a bunch of trainers, and they'll all be kind of in fixed positions. Most of them will be in fixed positions, and they'll all be facing kind of in fixed directions, except for some trainers that I'll talk about pretty soon. But so this guy was facing north, and you might have seen that I ran to his side and I talked to him from the side instead of just running in front of him. If I run in front of him, he will catch me and challenge me to a fight. Whereas if I run to his side and talk to him, he will still challenge me to a fight. But when he catches me, there's this exclamation point that appears above him. You'll see one later in the run. And that takes 2 seconds to play before I actually get to battle the trainer. Whereas if I run to his side, it only takes like half a second or a quarter of a second or something like that. Some negligible amount of time. So, gotta save the frames.
Yep.
I almost made it to Flockacy Ranch without an encounter.
Yeah, and obviously, random encounters do happen in the tall grass, and because there's not really any point in most cases for us to get in them and actually fight them or catch them in a speed run, you just run away.
Yeah, the thing about random encounters in this game, so in a lot of RPG speedruns, you might grind some random encounters to just kind of level up at some point because there's some very tough boss or something and it just turns out to be faster if you just grind for a few minutes. Well, in this game, the thing is, random Pokemon do not give very much XP at all compared to trainer Pokemon, so there's basically no reason to ever face them. If you really wanted to grind, you could fight an extra trainer somewhere, but for the most part, you're going to get to the levels you need to get just by facing the trainers that are absolutely required. I will fight 2 optional trainers in this game, that is, trainers I could otherwise skip, but that's it. So yeah, this is our rival, Hugh. He's fun. He's gonna have some fun one-liners later on.
Yeah.
But he's very, very fixated on doing stuff. He just wants to go and do stuff at all times, pretty much. And also, spoiler, he's really sad because his sister lost her Pokemon years and years ago to an evil team called Team Plasma. And as you will soon find, they are the main villains of this story. There's number 2. So, sometimes it is theoretically possible to actually get through this entire first section of the game with 0 encounters. Unlike in a lot of other RPGs, you get the items that you need to eliminate random encounters entirely very early on. They're called repels, and you just consume one, and it eliminates encounters for a certain number of steps through grass. So, those are really, really nice. I'm
Or
going to
in
get a ton of
caves
them.
as well.
Right. There are some places like caves and things like that where you can have wild encounters without actually having to go through grass. There's no, like, everything is considered grass. What am I doing? Let me just walk a few extra tiles.
Yeah, and another thing that pops up, although it isn't for a while, is shaking grass and dust clouds. They're equivalent to each other just for different areas. And basically they have a different kind of encounter where it's a special kind of Pokemon for that area. And they just pop up randomly as you move around. They last for a little while. And they do have some effects, but we won't explain those necessarily until they have
We'll
the
see.
potential to come up.
There is a slight chance that something hilarious happens about 2.5 hours into the run. If it does, I will probably not be able to stop laughing.
Neither would I, to be fair.
and there's one other runner of this game, and I'll talk about other runners of this game a little later on. So right now, I just got a TM. That means technical machine, for those of you who haven't played Pokemon. this teaches a new move to my Pokemon. So this move is called Frustration. It's a fun move. It deals more damage the less friendly your Pokemon is toward you. There's an invisible counter that measures that called Happiness. It's just a number from 0 to 255 for each of your Pokemon. And when you initially get your starter, it's at 70. And then as it levels up and as you walk around the world with that Pokemon in your party, the friendship value increases. And it can increase fairly rapidly. So I will be max happiness by, I think, the 4th gym, practically. So Frustration basically has about the same power right now as, slightly more power right now than the first move I had, which was Tackle. So it's going to do very slightly more damage, just enough that I will be able to defeat a few Pokemon in 2 hits instead of 3 hits. Not necessarily guaranteed, but there's an increased chance.
And these fights right here are a tutorial that is meant to teach you about the different types of Pokemon, their strengths and weaknesses.
Indeed.
Because there's a big, complicated system which can be neatly expressed in a table, which is found all over if you look up FAQs for Pokemon games, for which types are
He paralyzed me, but it's alright. We got
better
through it.
or worse against others in terms of how much damage they deal or take from that type's moves. And each Pokemon gets a bonus damage for each move of its own type that deals damage, called same type attack bonus or stab. And
That's my favorite name for something, by the way.
Yeah.
Stab.
and that increases the base power of the move by 50% effectively.
So, as you mentioned, this is basically a pair of tutorial battles to teach type effectiveness. But another nice little feature here is in between these 2 battles, you might have noticed that, for example, the first battle I got paralyzed, and we'll talk about paralyzed. We'll talk about paralyzed later on.
Yes.
But in the first battle I got paralyzed, and I also was at something like 20 HP or something like that. You notice that I got healed up, and you might have seen Alder say, "Let me heal your Pokemon in between." So one really nice feature of this particular game compared to other games in other generations of Pokemon is you get a lot of free heals. And when I say heals, it doesn't just restore your HP and status. Like in a Final Fantasy game, for example, it restores your MP, or more accurately, the equivalent in this game is your PP, the move points that you have. So move points are super, super important. Managing my PP very carefully is a super important aspect of this speedrun route, because if I run out of PP for a move, I can't use it again until I go to one of those buildings you just saw, the building that Bianca took me a tutorial of earlier, a Pokemon Center. And unfortunately, that's a really lengthy detour. Like, it can be 20 to 30 seconds to go in there and heal up, depending on whether I have to do other stuff and how slow the load times are. Load times don't actually vary that much, but they can actually vary between a DS like this and a 3DS. So if you play this game on 3DS, it will actually take you longer because of the load times, which is kind of an irritating aspect. Alright, tutorial stuff sort of kind of done. We are at least going to get to do a gym. This is our first real kind of test of stuff. This is the normal type gym. The gym leader here is Cheren. Cheren was a character in Pokemon Black 1, and you had like 18 battles with him.
Yeah, he was one of your 2 rivals from that game.
Yeah, I'm actually not kidding when I say that the number of rival battles in Pokemon Black and White 1 was 12, unless you count N, who is kind of, spoilers, the main villain of that game, in which case I believe it was 17 rival battles. In this game, there are substantially fewer. I believe there's 5, all with Hugh. You don't really have a different rival, which is nice.
And I believe that's including the ones where he's on your side as well, correct?
No, I'm not counting the partner battles or anything.
I honestly don't count them.
Yeah, partner battles. Those are fun. We'll get to those in a bit, too.
Oh, there's a rival battle coming up. I don't count how many there are.
So this gym is kind of the main reason that I taught the move Frustration. I could have just used Tackle. Actually, by this point, Frustration is not substantially more powerful than Tackle is, but it's more powerful enough, if that makes sense, that it gives me a higher chance of two-shotting all these Pokemon here, instead of having to three-shot them.
And
So,
that is another thing. Each move is going to deal basically within a certain range of damage. Pokemon speedrunners will refer to them as damage ranges. And that means that obviously there's a certain chance that it'll deal enough damage to KO the Pokemon you're fighting, or that it won't. And you hope for obviously a good result on your end. And you will hear him talking about them for good and bad, trust me.
I'm gonna guess that this one is gonna have a damage range. Yeah, so notice that I didn't quite do half damage to this Lillipup. That means he survives. So that's a little bit upsetting, but it's not too bad. It wastes one turn. A turn is about 6 to 7 seconds, depending, which is not a huge deal if you just hear that number, but over the course of a speed run, it can add up to a lot. So you really want to minimize your number of turns. And the other thing is damage ranges in this game are substantially less bad than a lot of other RPGs. They're only 15% compared to the base amount of damage. So I really want to heal to full right now before I face the gym leader. And I'm also going to save for the first time. So I will be safety saving a fair bit in this game. There are a number of places where I can get trolled by various kinds of things. I would really like to not have that happen in a marathon run, so we're going to save.
And he just gave his Pokemon a berry. Berries are one of a subset of held items which have certain effects. Each Pokemon can hold an item, and if they are in a battle, there are certain effects. Berry is triggered when you drop below a certain HP threshold.
This particular berry, at least.
Yeah, and will have the effect, in this case, of restoring your health a little bit.
Yep. The number is 10, and that's actually an important amount of health, because Charon's second Pokemon can make my life really miserable. His first is not that dangerous. It's going to use a move called Workup that boosts attack and special attack, but that doesn't mean anything if you don't actually attack me, so I'm just going to defeat him real quick, and he doesn't actually get to do anything. So being at full health right now is really nice, except there's a distinct possibility that that doesn't matter, because the Lillipup has exactly the same amount of speed as me, and it can spend the first 2 turns working up, as Patrat did. But then on the 3rd turn, if I don't win the speed tie, it can theoretically crit me and just one-shot me, and the berry won't trigger, because it can just, if it deals 43 damage, I'm done. Fortunately, it worked up twice. I'm dumb. Disregard anything I was saying. Fortunately, I won the speed tie. That's what actually happened. So we got through that gym leader. That is troll number 1. I would say about the first 2 hours of this run are just filled with potential trolls, and then after that, you're kind of free and clear, sort of a little bit, not entirely really. But you have better options to recover. But early in the game, like if I wiped a Charon, I just reset on a, on a PB attempt or something. Obviously in a marathon, I would have reset too, but I also had a save. Only 4, I think? Or maybe it was 3, I forget. I guess I should have been counting. Maybe I should donate for each time that I reset.
There were effectively 3 failed attempts, plus the one where you messed up the name. And
oh, that's true. So that's
yeah.
3 plus, yeah, okay.
Plus 1, so yeah, 4, I think.
Right,
and now
4.
he's getting Return, which is basically frustration in reverse. The more your Pokemon likes you, the more damage that move deals. And because its affection, its happiness is going to keep going up over the course of the run, that means it's just going to keep getting more and more powerful up to a certain point. Obviously, its base power maxes out at 102, which is pretty high. It has accuracy of 100, which is really nice. And it's a mainstay in this route.
It also has 20 PP, which is really, really important for me. There's a couple other options that are comparable to Return, but none of them have as high base power when I do this run, because, as he said, it caps out 102. The most likely competitor is a move called Strength, which is actually a hidden machine move, which means it's intended to be sort of intended to be used as a move that you use on the overworld map to affect the world. But it also happens to have 80 power and 20 PP and 100% accuracy, base accuracy. By the way, this is the C gear. You're never going to see it in this speedrun. But yeah, Return has more power and the same other qualities, so it's just straight up better than every other alternative. I actually used to do a speedrun of Pokemon Black with Snivy, which is the grass starter in this game. And in that speedrun, there's also an alternative of a move called Slam, which is really a comparable move. It has 80 power, but it also has a high chance to miss. So all that stuff is just, like, there's really no reason to not use Return, pretty much.
Hey, Legend,
Yeah, what's up?
what do you want Runner's choice to go to?
Final Fantasy VI 100%.
Okay.
Must be met.
The one good thing about the Snivy route, though, is that its main buffing move is Coil, and that, as I recall, does raise accuracy among 2 other stats.
So now we get to use Repels. Repels are awesome. Repels are basically, as I mentioned, temporary Moogle charms. You will not get encounters while using Repel unless, should be clear, unless the wild Pokemon in the area that you're in are higher level than the lead Pokemon in your party, in which case you can still get encounters. Fortunately, in a Pokemon speedrun, for the most part, you're going to use one Pokemon. Basically, you're going to get your starter, and then you're just going to use it forever. And as a result, that starter is going to be really high level all the time. It's going to be higher level than almost everything. So I will never see a random encounter in this run until I specifically want one, and there will be a time when I do.
The one exception is the Shaking Bushes or Dust Clouds that
That's
I mentioned
true.
earlier.
Yeah, if you run into Shaking Grass or Dust Cloud, you get an encounter.
You get an encounter, or for Dust Clouds, you can also get an item.
That's true. I've had that happen in a run, actually. I've just biked right on top of a cloud the moment it spawned and gotten like a gem and been like, oh man. Oh man, so this Rioli used a move that I hate. It's called Endure. Can someone please get a counter of the number of times Endures are used, and as well as Protect and Detect? So far we're at 1. These moves waste my time, and they're really annoying. I will absolutely tell you when to increment it. So far we're at 1. What I want is to do a counter of the number of times I get either Endure or Protect or Detect, which are moves that can be used and just prevent my move that I use from having any effect, or Fake Out. Also, we're going to count the number of times that Hugh's Samurott uses Encore later in the run. We're gonna make a counter of all those things, because all those things are big trolls.
I can do Endure, Protect, and everything on the screen.
Don't worry, I'll tell you when to count the counter. Just to be, yes, that's correct. Just to be 100% clear. So this trainer that I just ran into is actually what's called a spinner. It's a fairly common concept in Pokemon games since Generation 2. Basically, some stationary trainers kind of stand in place, but turn in random directions instead of facing one direction. And if you cross whatever direction they happen to be facing at the time, you are going to have to fight them. But if you can cross when they're not looking, then why did I do that? That was dumb. Okay, so I just wasted Repel, which is going to be funny later on, but that's alright. Actually, I just saw a speedrun by someone else of this game like a week ago where he did the same thing. So shout-outs to Garfield. That's for you, man. Yeah, anyway, the reason I intentionally fought that spinner, I actually could have tried to dodge her. You can wait until they're not looking in the direction that you're trying to cross and then just go. The reason I intentionally fought her is, now that I've done that, I'm going to get to level 15 during the first fight of the next gym. So the next gym is pretty much immediate. There's no more battles before the next gym. And there's 2 trainers in there that have Pokemon that are not like particularly weak against anything that I have. So getting level 15 during that first fight will give me a move called Flame Charge, and that's really going to help. Flame Charge has 50 base damage and also gets same type attack bonus, which Alec described earlier, which will increase the damage to 75. And that will be more powerful than Tackle.
And it's also a physical move, which Tepig line excels with.
Oh, yes.
And it raises your speed 1 step each time you use it. Each of these buffs that you'll be seeing a lot of in various forms over the course of this run. Each stat can be raised a total of 6 times in a battle, and that only lasts for that battle. Or if they're switched out or certain other things can cancel it.
What am I doing? Please. Give the berry.
But
to the
anyway,
Pokemon.
it's a rather significant increase to that particular stat, in that it caps out at, I believe, a total of 400% of the stat after 6 raises,
Yes.
because each one gives you an extra 50%. And there are items that can do it as well, though they're rare. You saw him.
I got the burn. That's a completely unnecessary effect.
burn!
So the move Ember has, along with several other fire-type moves, has like a 10% chance to burn its target. Burn is a status effect that reduces the target's attack stat to, I think, by half or something.
I think it's reduces it to 75%, but I could be wrong.
I don't recall
It's a
specifically.
significant reduction regardless. It's not something you want to have happen to you in most cases.
It also causes damage to you at the end of every turn, similar to another debuff, Poison. So Burn is really irritating if it affects you, but it's not. It doesn't come up all that often.
Especially because Tepig can't be burned as a fire type.
Yeah, exactly. So for me to get it though is also pretty uncommon, and we're gonna hope for another 10% proc later on in this run. In fact, pretty soon in this run. So actually, I specifically didn't heal before this battle, and I also I want to have a Pecha Berry equipped at all times in this gym. A Pecha Berry. A Pecha Berry does what you just saw right there, which is that the opponent used a move that would have poisoned me, but the Pecha Berry consumed that poison effect and caused me not to get poisoned, which is really, really nice. Unfortunately, once it gets consumed, I have to like re-equip one. Also, that guy disabled my Tail Whip, which is really kind of annoying. So now I have to not Tail Whip him. Now I'm not disabled. Thanks, game. Good stuff. It's a fixed number of turns that you can't use that move that was disabled. Okay, so now the gym leader, and I want to be at full health for this, and I know that some people will probably laugh, but I am going to safety save before this trainer, who is not even all that dangerous, but hey, might as well be safe. That's why they call it a
100%.
safety save.
Yeah, because otherwise he'd either lose a bunch of money, which is actually a little bit tight at the beginning of the game, or have to reset and go back quite a ways. So it's worth it to save every now and then, regardless, especially for a marathon run.
Yeah. Roxy doesn't have a huge chance of actually killing me. What's most likely is that she would poison me like an extra time, and then I would be in danger of possibly having a bad thing happen, and I would just have to heal up, which would take some time. So here's where you're going to kind of see the main strategy for gym leaders, which is that I'm going to kind of do setup at the beginning of the fight, and then subsequently try to sweep with high damage moves. So what I just did there was to Tail Whip twice. Tail Whip is a move that lowers the defense of the target, which allows my physical moves to deal more damage. So if I use Tail Whip twice, my Flame Charge does enough damage that 2 of them will defeat that coughing. And now on Whirlipede, actually the Tail Whip has no effect on the Whirlipede, it's only the Pokemon that was out at the... What did I tell you?
See, things like that can happen.
That is why we safety save, sir. The crit with Venoshock. Yeah, so Venoshock is actually not even that dangerous a move if you're not poisoned. And I wasn't poisoned, but it can crit, and crits do a lot of damage.
Yeah.
In fact, double damage.
Crits, in the vast majority of cases, deal double damage, and the exception is when your Pokemon has an ability called Sniper, in which case they deal 3 times. That doesn't come up at all in this run.
Yeah.